In the desert, freedom is not given but taken. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely hands, and the strongest chains are broken by those who refuse to remain captive. Jack McBride, a 42-year-old outlaw with road dust coating his weathered face and a jagged scar cutting across his right cheek, wandered through the desert canyons of Arizona Territory searching for a new hideout after a failed stagecoach robbery. His horse had died 3 days back from exhaustion, leaving him to trudge through the unforgiving landscape with nothing but his rifle, 2 revolvers, and dwindling supplies. On the 4th day of his journey, when his water was nearly gone and the sun beat down mercilessly, he stumbled upon a bizarre sight in Dead Snake Gulch. There, welded to a massive boulder, stood a metal cage barely large enough to hold a person. Inside sat a young woman of perhaps 25 years, her long auburn hair matted with dust and her blue eyes reflecting the color of winter sky. Her dress, though torn and stained, was made of fine fabric that marked her as a mail-order bride from back east. The woman watched Jack with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as he approached. Her lips were cracked from thirst, and her hands gripped the iron bars with white knuckles. Jack studied the crude locks securing the cage door, then drew his tomahawk from his belt. The metal rang against metal as he worked to break the mechanism, sweat dripping from his brow in the desert heat. After several hours of persistent effort, the lock finally gave way with a loud crack. The woman remained motionless, staring at Jack with disbelief. When he offered her water from his flask and hardtack from his pack, she gradually began to relax. Her voice was barely a whisper when she agreed to travel with him to the abandoned mining town of Cactus Flat, where Jack had established a temporary refuge in the ruins of an old blacksmith shop. In the half-ruined saloon of Cactus Flat, Jack gave the woman time to rest without forcing her to speak about her ordeal. He cleared debris from the old blacksmith shop, making it as comfortable as possible with salvaged furniture and blankets. The woman sat by the window for hours, staring out at the desert horizon with haunted eyes. For 5 days she remained silent, accepting food and water but offering no words. Jack respected her silence, understanding that whatever had happened to her ran deeper than physical wounds. He spent his time fortifying their temporary shelter and keeping watch for any signs of pursuit. On the 6th morning, as Jack prepared coffee over a small fire, she finally spoke. "My name is Martha," she said quietly, her voice still hoarse from her ordeal. "I cannot tell you my maiden name. It would put us both in greater danger." Jack nodded, pouring her a cup of the bitter brew. "No need to tell me anything you do not wish to, miss. You are safe here." Martha wrapped her hands around the warm tin cup. "I came from Boston as a mail-order bride to a farmer named Thomas Wilkins in Santa Fe. But I never reached him. Strange people intercepted the stagecoach 3 days out from Albuquerque." "What kind of strange people?" Jack asked, settling across from her. "Religious folk, but not the kind you would recognize. They spoke of purification and salvation, but their eyes held nothing holy." Martha shuddered despite the desert heat. "They took me to their settlement, and what I witnessed there." She trailed off, unable to continue. Martha began helping Jack with daily tasks, cooking meals and cleaning their temporary quarters. She also took to watching the surrounding desert from the loft window, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon with the tension of someone who knew danger had not given up the chase. Jack rode to the town of Pecos for gunpowder and supplies, leaving Martha alone for the first time since her rescue. The journey would take 2 days, and he hesitated at the thought of abandoning her, but their provisions were running dangerously low. "Keep the rifle close," he told her before departing. "If anyone comes asking questions, you do not know me and you have never seen me." Martha nodded, clutching the Winchester he had left for her protection. "I understand. Be careful, Jack. They have eyes everywhere." When Jack returned on the 2nd evening, his horse laden with supplies, he found a disturbing sight by the blacksmith shop door. Arranged in a deliberate pattern were raven feathers woven together with red thread, alongside melted candle wax formed into the shape of a cross. The message was clear and ominous. "Martha!" he called out, drawing his revolver as he approached the door. She appeared in the doorway, pale but unharmed. "3 men came while you were gone," she said, her voice trembling slightly. They wore long black coats and tall hats, despite the heat. "They asked about me, but they did not dare enter the building." "What did they say exactly?" Jack demanded, scanning the surrounding ruins for any sign of watchers. "They called me the Lost Lamb, said I belonged with the flock. The leader, a tall man with burned scars on his face, left those tokens." Martha pointed to the feathers and wax. He said they would return when the time was right for my redemption. Jack began teaching Martha to shoot with his spare Colt revolver. She proved to be an apt student, her hand steady and her eye keen. Years of hardship had not broken her spirit, only hardened her resolve to survive. "Good," Jack said as her shots found their mark on a makeshift target. "Never hesitate to pull that trigger if they come back." That night, Martha burned the ominous feathers in the blacksmith forge, watching the flames consume the dark tokens. She had found a long knife among the old mining tools and now carried it at her side. The atmosphere of dread settled over Cactus Flat like a shroud. During a fierce sandstorm that howled between the abandoned buildings of Cactus Flat, Martha finally revealed the full truth about her suffering to Jack. They sat huddled in the blacksmith shop as wind rattled the wooden shutters and sand seeped through every crack in the walls. "The stagecoach was attacked by bandits first," Martha began, her voice barely audible above the storm. "But then these religious people arrived and drove the bandits away. At first, I thought they were rescuing us." Jack poured whiskey into 2 tin cups, sensing she would need the courage it provided. "What happened to the other passengers?" "There was an elderly merchant and my traveling companion, a young servant girl named Sarah." Martha accepted the cup with shaking hands. "The sect took us to their settlement in a hidden valley. They called it New Eden. The leader, Brother Ezekiel, said we were blessed to witness their holy work." The wind outside grew stronger, creating an eerie backdrop to her tale. "They had rules for everything. When to pray, when to speak, when to remain silent." Sarah tried to resist their demands. She refused to participate in their purification rituals. Martha paused, tears streaming down her face. "They sealed her alive in the chapel basement as punishment. I could hear her screaming for 3 days before the sound stopped." Jack felt his blood run cold. "And you?" "I bit off the finger of one of their enforcers when he tried to drag me to the chapel for my own purification ceremony. That is when they put me in that cage. Brother Ezekiel said the desert would teach me humility where their kindness had failed." Martha stood and moved to the window, watching the storm rage outside. "They believe they are saving souls through torment. The more you suffer, the more pure you become in their twisted doctrine." Jack began reinforcing their refuge immediately, setting traps around the town perimeter and boarding up unnecessary entrances. He retrieved additional weapons from a hidden cache, including dynamite he had stolen months earlier. "I swear they will never take you alive again," Jack declared grimly. Martha gripped her knife tighter. "I would rather die fighting than return to that hell." The summer heat transformed Cactus Flat into a furnace, but the oppressive temperature was nothing compared to the sinister signs that began appearing around their refuge. Each morning brought new evidence that their enemies were closing in, marking their territory like predators circling wounded prey. Water barrels that Jack had carefully positioned around the settlement were found overturned, their precious contents soaking uselessly into the desert sand. Biblical verses appeared nailed to doors overnight, written in a flowing script that spoke of judgment and divine retribution. Most disturbing of all were the human teeth scattered around the old well like grotesque warnings, each one filed to sharp points. "They are playing with us," Martha observed as she swept the teeth into a cloth bag. "Brother Ezekiel enjoys psychological torment before he strikes. He believes fear purifies the soul." A stray coyote had attached itself to them during this time, a mangy creature that Martha named Wolf. The animal sensed danger and refused to leave their side, pacing restlessly around the blacksmith shop and growling at shadows that moved between the abandoned buildings. Strange events multiplied with each passing day. White roses appeared in the empty houses, their petals somehow fresh despite the brutal heat. The rope on the well bucket was found cut cleanly with a sharp blade, forcing them to draw water with improvised methods. Martha began constructing defensive barriers from scrap metal and stones, her movements quick and desperate. "They want us to know they are watching," she explained as she reinforced a window with metal sheeting. "Every morning I feel eyes upon me, but when I look, there is nothing but empty desert." The sensation of being observed grew stronger each night. Martha recited prayers in whispered tones, not from faith but from a desperate need to calm her nerves. Jack took to sleeping in shifts, one eye always open, his hand never far from his weapons. During the hottest part of one afternoon, they spotted a figure in white robes moving between the buildings on the far edge of town. When Jack grabbed his rifle and went to investigate, he found only footprints in the sand and the lingering scent of incense carried on the desert wind. "How many of them are out there?" Jack asked that evening as they shared a meager supper. Martha stared into the darkness beyond their flickering candle. "Brother Ezekiel never travels with fewer than 12 disciples. They call themselves the Apostles of Purification. She paused, listening to a sound that might have been wind or might have been distant singing. I think I hear their evening prayers. At dawn, a lone rider approached Cactus Flat on a white horse that seemed to glow against the red desert landscape. The man was tall and gaunt, dressed in a black suit with a matching top hat despite the scorching heat. A Bible was clutched in his left hand while his right rested on the ivory handle of a revolver at his hip. Jack met him in the middle of the main street, rifle ready but not yet aimed. The stranger, his pale eyes held the fervor of absolute conviction, and burn scars covered half his face like a grotesque mask. "Good morning, brother," the man said in a voice smooth as silk yet cold as winter wind. "I seek a lost lamb who has wandered from the flock. Perhaps you have seen her?" "Cannot say that I have," Jack replied carefully, studying the man, his every movement. "This is a lonely place. Few travelers pass through." The stranger smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to points. "She is a woman of perhaps 25 years, with auburn hair and eyes like winter sky. Goes by the name Martha, though that is not the name God gave her. Afraid you have the wrong town, friend. Now I suggest you move along before the heat gets too much for that fancy outfit of yours." The man dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and theatrical. "Brother Ezekiel sends his greetings. He wishes you to know that all sins can be forgiven through proper purification. Even the sin of harboring stolen property." Jack, his grip tightened on his rifle. "I do not know any Brother Ezekiel, and I have not stolen anything from anyone. The woman belongs to our congregation. She was promised to Brother Ezekiel in holy matrimony, but the devil filled her heart with rebellion." The stranger opened his Bible and read from a marked passage, Ephesians 5, verse 22. "Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord." "Your business is not with me," Jack said firmly. "Now get back on that horse and ride out of here." The messenger smiled again, closing the Bible with a sharp snap. "Tell her that the bell will call her home for evening prayers. She will understand what this means." He mounted his horse with fluid grace. "We shall return when the sun sets tomorrow. If she comes willingly, no blood need be shed. If not," he shrugged eloquently, "and if I have something to say about that, then you will join the many others who have tried to stand between God and his righteous work." The stranger touched the brim of his hat in mock courtesy. "Good day, brother. Pray for wisdom." That night, Martha explained the significance of the bell to Jack as they kept watch from different windows. "In their chapel stands a great iron bell. They ring it twice daily to summon everyone for prayers. Missing a prayer session means punishment." Her voice trembled with remembered fear. "The sound haunts my dreams." The morning after the messenger, its visit brought dust clouds on the horizon as desert winds picked up strength, but more disturbing were the sounds that drifted across the wasteland. Coyotes howled more frequently than usual, a sure sign that strangers had entered their territory and disrupted the natural order of the desert. New biblical quotes appeared on the blacksmith shop door, written in red paint that seemed to never fully dry despite the blazing sun. One passage was smeared repeatedly, as if invisible hands kept disturbing the still wet letters. Martha suspected that several of their pursuers were now hidden around the settlement, taking turns to leave these ominous messages. "Look at this," Martha called Jack to the town well. The water level had dropped dramatically overnight, far faster than natural evaporation could account for. At the bottom, white objects gleamed in the dim light filtering down the stone shaft. Jack lowered a rope with a hook and pulled up their grisly discovery. Animal bones, cleaned and bleached white, had been deliberately thrown into their water supply. Each bone bore carved symbols that Martha recognized from her captivity. "They are trying to poison our minds before they poison our bodies," she said, examining the markings. "These symbols represent purification through suffering." The most terrifying development was the figure in white robes that appeared each morning and evening between the abandoned buildings. When they tried to approach, the shape would vanish like a desert mirage, leaving behind only the faint scent of burning sage and the echo of whispered prayers. In the distance, carried on the desert wind, came the sound they both dreaded most. The deep, resonant toll of an iron bell, ringing the traditional call to evening prayer. The sect had established their camp somewhere in the surrounding hills, close enough to make their presence felt but far enough to remain hidden. "They are playing with us like cats with mice," Martha observed as she checked her weapons for the 10th time that day. Brother Ezekiel believes that fear and anticipation make the final surrender more complete. Wolf, their coyote companion, grew increasingly agitated as the day wore on. The animal refused to venture far from the blacksmith shop and spent hours staring into the desert with hackles raised, sensing dangers that human eyes could not detect. That night brought new horrors. They found Wolf dead near the well, a precise cut in the shape of a cross carved into his side. The message was unmistakable. Their time was running out, and tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. With the threat becoming unbearable, Martha prepared for the inevitable confrontation with grim determination. She methodically checked every weapon in their arsenal, cleaning the rifle barrels and counting ammunition with the precision of a seasoned gunfighter. Her hands moved with steady purpose as she created additional fortifications from furniture and scrap metal. "Help me move this table to the east window," she instructed Jack, positioning a broken clock on the windowsill as an alarm signal. "If they approach from that direction, the clock will fall and warn us." Jack watched her work with growing respect. The frightened woman he had rescued from the cage was transforming into a fierce defender of her own freedom. Martha had melted old metal objects in the blacksmith forge, casting crude but effective bullets for their revolvers when their store-bought ammunition ran low. "Tell me more about their weaknesses," Jack said as he reinforced the door with iron bars. "Every enemy has something that can be exploited." Martha paused in her work, wiping sweat from her brow. "Brother Ezekiel is vain about his appearance despite his burn scars. He always positions himself where others must look up at him. The other disciples follow him blindly, but they hesitate to act without direct orders." The chanting of the cultists became audible each night, drifting across the desert like the voices of the damned. Their songs spoke of redemption through pain and salvation through submission, words that made Martha shudder with remembered terror. "They will come at sunset tomorrow," Martha predicted with certainty. "Brother Ezekiel believes that dying light symbolizes the death of sin. He also knows the setting sun will blind us if we try to shoot westward." They arranged their weapons strategically throughout the blacksmith shop, placing loaded guns within easy reach of every defensive position. Jack positioned his stolen dynamite near the main entrance, ready to collapse the roof if they were overrun. "Promise me something," Martha said as they completed their preparations. "If they capture me alive, do not let them take me back to that place." A bullet would be a mercy compared to what they would do. Jack met her eyes solemnly. "It will not come to that. We will fight them together, and we will win together." As darkness fell, they took their positions and waited for dawn, knowing it would likely be their last peaceful night in Cactus Flat. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and the distant sound of prayers, omens of the battle to come. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across Cactus Flat, the cult emerged from the desert like specters rising from hell itself. They wore flowing white robes that billowed in the evening wind and wooden masks carved with religious symbols, their faces hidden behind grotesque representations of angels and saints. Brother Ezekiel led the procession, his tall frame unmistakable even beneath his ceremonial garments. In his hands he carried the same chains that had once bound Martha's cage, the metal links gleaming with malevolent purpose. His burnt face was partially visible beneath his mask, the scars catching the dying light like branded flesh. "Martha, my wayward bride!" His voice boomed across the empty town. "The time for redemption has come. Return to the fold willingly, and your suffering shall be brief. Resist, and learn the true meaning of purification through agony." From their fortified position in the blacksmith shop, Martha and Jack watched the cultists spread out in a wide circle around their refuge. There were 12 of them in total, just as Martha had predicted, each one carrying both weapons and religious implements. "Come out, child of sin!" Brother Ezekiel continued his twisted sermon. "Your protector cannot save you from the righteous judgment of the Almighty." Martha stepped into the doorway, her revolver drawn and steady. "I am no longer the frightened woman you caged in the desert," she shouted back. "If you want me, come and take me." The battle erupted in a thunder of gunfire and shouting voices. Jack opened fire from the east window while Martha defended the main entrance, their carefully planned crossfire catching several cultists in the open. The traps they had set around the perimeter claimed 2 more attackers, their agonized screams echoing through the settlement. Brother Ezekiel himself charged toward Martha with chains raised high, his eyes blazing with fanatical fury. She met his attack with cold determination, her knife finding his shoulder and drawing first blood. The cult leader staggered back, shock replacing confidence on his scarred features. "You have learned to bite back, little lamb," he snarled, clutching his wounded arm. "But the wolf always wins in the end." "I am no longer prey," Martha replied, raising her gun. "I am the hunter now." The remaining cultists, seeing their leader wounded and several of their number dead or dying, began to falter. Without Brother Ezekiel, his commanding presence to drive them forward, their fanatical courage wavered. When Jack detonated his dynamite near their position, the survivors broke ranks and fled into the gathering darkness, abandoning their wounded leader to his fate. After the battle ended and the desert reclaimed its silence, Jack and Martha buried the bodies of the fallen cultists on the outskirts of town, marking their graves with simple wooden crosses. They burned all religious artifacts and ceremonial robes, watching the flames consume the symbols of fanaticism that had terrorized them for so long. Martha carried the chains from her former cage to the blacksmith forge and melted them down completely, symbolically destroying the last physical reminder of her captivity. As the metal liquefied in the intense heat, she felt the final bonds of her past dissolving into nothing. Brother Ezekiel, wounded but alive, had crawled away into the desert during the confusion of battle. His followers who survived the encounter scattered like leaves before a storm, their faith shattered by witnessing their leader's defeat. Without easy prey to torment, the fanatics lost interest in pursuing their broken dream of forced redemption. "Will they return?" Jack asked as they watched the last of the cult, his belongings turn to ash. Martha shook her head with newfound confidence. Brother Ezekiel was their strength and their weakness. Without his commanding presence, they are just lost souls wandering the desert. They will find easier targets elsewhere. In the months that followed, Martha chose to remain with Jack in the restored Cactus Flat. Together they turned the abandoned mining town into a safe haven for travelers crossing the dangerous desert. Martha dug a new well far from the contaminated one and helped transform the settlement into a legitimate stopover for honest folk seeking shelter. They discovered a small vein of silver in the old mine and worked it together, providing enough income to purchase supplies and ammunition. Martha proved as skilled with a pickaxe as she was with a gun, her determination driving them both toward prosperity. Years passed peacefully until the day a federal marshal finally tracked Jack down, recognizing him from wanted posters that had followed him across 3 territories. In the gunfight that ensued, Jack fell defending the town he had helped create, dying as he had lived, with his guns in his hands. Martha became the sole proprietor of Cactus Flat, ensuring safety for all who sought refuge in the desert. She never married, having found her strength in independence rather than submission. Travelers spoke of the fierce woman who ran the Desert Way Station, a guardian angel who protected the innocent and showed no mercy to those who preyed upon the weak. The bell of Brother Ezekiel was never heard again across the Arizona Territory.